Welcome to In the Margins, where we spark connection through stories. I'm your host, Laura Lynn Donahue, and each week I invite guests to step outside the lines and into the margins with me. You'll hear the untold stories, the stories of risk and reward, of triumph and trial, and everything in between. Thanks for joining me. Let's dive in. Today on In the Margins, I'm honored to welcome Chris Krueger, a U.S. Army Ranger veteran and author of the memoir, Walking Away from the Ledge. Chris takes us beyond the battlefield into the hidden battles of brotherhood, trauma, addiction, and survival, and the fight that follows you home. Our conversation today is about identity, silence, resilience, and the search for the meaning in the margins of life. Welcome, Chris. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm really glad to have you here, Chris. Thanks for
Thank
being
you.
willing to join me.
Yeah.
I know that your memoir, Walking Away from the Ledge, that you just recently released that, right?
Yes.
Yep. Of this year.
August 5th is when it released. The
August.
pre-launch was about July 15th, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Okay. And just for the listeners, will you give us a little bit of a background of what your memoir is kind of generally covers, and then we can talk about some more of the details.
Sure. It covers my 22 and a half years of Army experience, from infantryman to aviation as a Black Hawk pilot, and kind of the ups and downs of numerous deployments in there. I deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan for a total of just under 6 years of my life, balancing that with marriage, kids, and the struggles I had with alcohol addiction in the mix of there.
Yeah.
And the end state of the story is really just trying to encourage people to seek the help that they need or could use to overcome those struggles, and not just stash it away in a box, to deal with it so they could move on appropriately, I guess I would say.
I think stories are important to be told because it really gives us room. When we hear someone else's story, it gives us room to be okay with maybe our story.
Yeah, it kind of gives you that permission to be like, oh, okay, until you hear someone else's journey, you just kind of think it's my own, nobody else dealt with it, but there are similar struggles out there. So yeah, it gives us that kind of permission to say, hey, I can talk about this, or maybe I do need some help through it.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we can all use some help.
Yeah.
So just thinking about going into the Army, and you were an Army Ranger, is that something different? Just, I'm a little naive on all the terminology, so forgive me on that, but sure. I read Army Ranger.
Sure. So yes and no.
Okay.
I was Ranger qualified, which means I went to Ranger school and earned the Ranger tab, but I was never in a Ranger battalion. So if it came down to a semantic debate, it would be, no, I wasn't a Ranger. I was merely Ranger qualified, but I was also in all my time in infantry was in a long range surveillance unit, which is primarily airborne Ranger unit, being qualified those things. So, and then Army technical terms is that if you earn a Ranger tab, you are a Ranger. So to squash the whole thing, if someone who actually made it into Ranger battalion, which I did not, they would say I was not a Ranger.
Gotcha.
However, the Army, by its verbiage, would say I am. So I just say I am a Ranger qualified, or was a Ranger qualified infantryman, just for argument's sake. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, why not make it complicated?
Yeah. And it is, I'll say too, it is like an ego thing, really. Like, you're not a real Ranger unless you're in Ranger battalion and that kind of thing. Okay, fine. I'm not going to sit here and have that argument with somebody. I'll just be like, yeah, you're right. If someone else goes, oh, you're a Ranger, I'll be like, yeah, instead of telling that whole story right there.
Yeah. Just let it lie. So one thing that I thought was interesting as you were in your career is you were part of HALO.
Yep.
And that acronym is
High Altitude Low Opening. So it's also Military Free Fall, or MFF was another one. So Army or military for skydiving. Yes.
Yeah. So when I was picturing it, I just really couldn't get a grasp of what that looked like free falling. So skydiving.
Yep.
With the
Yep, that's it.
parachute and okay. All right. How many times do you think you jumped out of a plane?
So there's also being airborne is the differences are with airborne, it's static line. So you jump out, there's a line attached to the parachute that automatically pulls it out for you.
Oh,
I finished with 30, it's 28 to 30. I can't remember offhand, static line jumps, but for the skydiving portion, I finished out with 105. So
wow.
I had a total of about 135 jumps for my entire infantry time, which was approximately 9 years.
Okay.
And then with Halo, it was pretty cool because we would do oxygen equipment or rucksacks and all this stuff. Now, for civilian wise, you have to have 500 jumps before you can start doing tandem jumps. You see them, jumping other people.
Yes.
I don't know how many jumps they have to be able to jump with any type of equipment. Was assuming it was at 500, but
Yeah.
for Halo, you do it in the school. You're jumping all that stuff, weapons, rucksacks, and oxygen equipment. The highest jump I ever had was 18,000 feet, which the Army requires oxygen for. And
Wow.
it's it's a really cool sight. You're just looking out there. It didn't matter that it was the middle of the day. On a hot day, it was just nice and cool and jump out. You're just falling for a good minute and 15 seconds, minute and 20 seconds before you pull the ripcord on that one. Another difference between airborne and Halo, but you have a good time for free fall before, just enjoy the view a little bit and try to stay with your buddies and don't hit anybody in the air. It was way more fun than flying a helicopter. I'll say that for sure.
Okay. How long did you fly a helicopter?
So that was about starting flight school till retirement, about 12 years.
Oh, okay.
Was,
All right.
the transition portion after my infantry time was 13 years. There was, some training in the middle of all that too that went for about a year, and then we got into the helicopters. And but yeah, about 12 years I flew helicopters. Started with the TH-67. It was a little training helicopter, kind of like your news helicopters you see flying around, and then on into the Black Hawk, which was it wasn't my first choice. It was kind of the aircraft I got stuck with, but it's a fantastic helicopter for sure.
Okay. So what was your first choice?
I wanted to fly Kiowas, which is also like your, news helicopter, but with guns on the side.
Okay.
My second choice would have been Apaches, and my last choice would have been Blackhawks. But I kind of cover it in the book there. When we got to my airframe selection, all they had was Blackhawks and Chinooks, and I kind of wanted to quit right then and there, but I chose Blackhawks, made my peace with it, and like I said, it's a fantastic aircraft. It really is.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. So let's talk about the person you were before you went into the Army and the person you became after years of service. Where do you see the greatest shift in your identity?
So before I joined, I wasn't this. I was never into sports. Still not into sports.
Yeah.
I wasn't physically athletic. I was never a picture of athleticism. I wasn't lazy either, but none of those were my thing. I didn't do any sports in high school, all that stuff. So that's kind of why I didn't ever want to join the military. I just saw that as something that was beyond my capability. And I didn't join right out of high school. I waited a couple years and I really had nothing else going for me. And I bumped into the Army recruiter, the same one on numerous occasions. So I was like, all right, I guess this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
So beforehand, I was working out a little bit, trying to, jog a little bit, just be in shape. And then, just consistently got better at all that stuff in the Army, sticking with it. So the fact that I accomplished all the schools, all the training and everything I did in the Army was just, it was by the grace of God alone, and the fact that I just wasn't going to quit anything that was handed to me. So I really gained some confidence, really learned a lot more about leadership because I wasn't leading myself very well. So then I had to do that by getting better at stuff and then be able to lead other people. And so, through my time in the infantry, going from a private to a staff sergeant promotable, which is, getting up there in the rank and all that.
Okay.
Before I went over to aviation, was just more leadership, more experience, more, physicality, and all the mental stuff that goes with it. Then into aviation, it's kind of just, you're just leading yourself a little bit more while working with a team, not necessarily leading a team. And then, learning the ins and outs of aviation, then you have to do what they call track. So you have to pick a route. Basically, you're either going to go be an instructor pilot, a maintenance test pilot, or safety, or aviation mission survivability. Right. So things that make the aircraft safe while you're deployed, you're responsible for that stuff. So I chose maintenance track. So learning the ins and outs, kind of joke about it, just being like Dr. Blackhawk, if there's a cold symptom, you got to know how to fix it.
Sure. Yeah.
That's the simplest way to put it.
Yeah. I like that analogy.
Yeah. And so, it was just, there was always some sort of learning going on throughout my entire military or Army career that, by the time I was ready to hang it all up, I think because I was always learning something different, always doing different schoolings and all that kind of stuff, I was ready to do something different when I hung it up. So I never had this issue really with identity, like this uniform is me, this, the boots, the uniform, the hat, the whatever, that I was ready to put it down and basically learn something else, which is what happened with the book. So I took a little time off, took a little breather, really just started chronicling my journey through this whole thing. So when I had a book, it was just paragraph by paragraph of here's what happened before I joined, here's what happened all the way through. And, my wife said, don't let it die, a PDF file on the computer. And, after she hooked me up with some people, we got the ball rolling and, the short version is it became a book and there it is. But yeah, I didn't really struggle. I know a lot of people do with identity, but for me and a lot of people that are kind of like me, it was just like, this is a job I'm doing. It's not who I am, so we're able to kind of, pick up from that and move on. And so yeah, that was, but it did, again, not necessarily give me an identity, but it taught me that I was only limited by the box I put on myself. And that was the biggest thing that I learned there is, and also that as long as I kept going, as long as I didn't quit, I could pretty much accomplish most anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a lot of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's interesting because I think to be able to put it down and go on to the next thing is not easy if you're inclined to take on the identity of the role, which would be how I would operate.
Right.
Just the role of mother. And, until all my kids were launched, it's like, okay, now who am I? It's just kind of reevaluating, this is what I did, but who was I while I was doing that? Do I remember her? It's interesting that you didn't have, that you weren't into athletics or training but then you saw this opportunity and kind of kept getting peeks into this one person. Was it at school that you were seeing him? Is that the recruiter?
No, it was after high school, and every time I bumped into him, I had a different job. Or I think the last time I bumped into him, I didn't have a job, so I was like, "All right, this is it then." Yeah, so I was like, "All right, this kind of answers my question right here." So
perfect timing.
But yeah, a lot of people do as well. Going back to what you're saying, in my position, they get out and they look for an aviation job. It's easy and there's a lot of money to be made.
Yeah.
And, I'd like that money too. But I just, was just like, I'm tired of it. I thought about, for a Blackhawk doing a main rotor track and balance, basically balancing the vibration of the blades as they're spinning in the middle of summer or in the middle of winter. And I was like, I don't want to do it anymore. I don't have to, and I don't want to, just some of the headaches that go along with it, even though the civilian version of it would be easier to deal with. And, we wouldn't have the aspect of having to be operational, still flying missions and all that kind of stuff. The mission would just be doing maintenance. But I was like, no, I want to see, there's got to be something else too, more than just what I was. Let's find out what that is.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have an answer to that?
So right now I'm just trying to enjoy, because another challenge I had was just trying to enjoy those moments after accomplishing, it was normally like when I finished Ranger school, it was like on to the next thing. It was, hey, go ahead and take your, 3-day weekend, your 4-day weekend, whatever. You just spent the last 2 months beating up your body and your brain, go ahead and take a break. But
Yeah.
then it's back to the grind and to the next thing. Same with deployments, we get back, we take a little leave and all that, but then it's like, okay, and then we're training for the next one.
Yeah.
So I definitely wanted to take some time, slowly work on book promotion and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But just enjoy the moment that it's out there, it's doing its thing, and
Yeah.
not try to rush into it. Cause I was starting to feel that. And that was a conversation that Jenny and I had, a few weeks back. We're like, well, instead of just focusing, jump into that next thing, why don't you take a moment and relax? I'm like, well, yeah. I was trying to, no, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, for now, just trying to enjoy it, and we'll see for sure where the next step goes.
Yeah.
Here, hopefully by the new year anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good that you're staying in the moment, staying present. And I mean, that speaks a lot. I mean, it's hard to do. But
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
a good exercise. Sometimes you just have to keep reminding yourself that's what you're doing,
Right.
or someone else will remind you, and kind of get back on track, so to speak.
It's definitely good to have those reminders too, because there are times like, okay, what's the next? No, I'm chilling.
So I know that while you were in the service, that you developed friendships, good friendships, and brotherhood, so to speak. Did you have any friends that went into service with you, or are these men and women people that you met there and established relationships with?
All of them would be people that I met there and established relationships with.
Okay.
There's a good few covered in the book, and a
Yeah.
couple by name as well. But in basic training, we had my battle buddy, help keep each other going the whole time, the whole way through. And, he was actually, he was a wrestler in high school, or maybe
Yeah.
even before high school and all that stuff. He was this big guy ready to go, and I was just like timid and kind of that. So but one thing that was always present was that I was also a quick learner, so I could pick things up real easy. So I wasn't holding him back in any way, shape, or form, but talked about it some years later, and he was like, "No, man, we were all in survival mode." So
Mm.
but yeah, and then when I went to my first infantry unit, 15 of us went at the same time, and none of us, we might have known of each other while we were kind of waiting to head up there, but we really got to know each other going there. And we kind of had
Yeah.
this bond of being all the new guys, taking all the flack when we first got there. But
Right.
and then, deployments again, just really when you spend that 12 months or 15 months with the same people, you really get to know them, because you can't go months on end and just not know somebody's family, not know somebody's back, things like that, and really get to know them. So there's a good handful that I keep in touch with pretty regularly, and then another handful that I keep in touch with loosely. But we just had a reunion up in Oregon from some of the guys in the infantry unit, and one of the guys throws it together. He has a farm up there, so he's like, "Hey, as many people as can make it. We got all the space. It's come on up." And so there was about 12 to 15 people that made it up there. And some of them I hadn't seen, in nearly 25 years. Well, no,
Oh,
about
wow.
20 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was great catching up, and it's just, just like picking up where we left off. And some of them had started reading the book already. So they were like, "Oh, I
Oh,
love the
nice.
stories. Reminds me of so many things from that
Yeah.
time and all that." And so, and it's weird because again, writing the book was just like something I just did,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then just following it through was something I just did. And so, they were like, "Oh, that's amazing," and I was like, "Oh, yeah, it was pretty cool." And they're like, "No, like I couldn't do that, and you went and did it."
Yeah.
And it's something, that we all can get to enjoy. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. I'm like, all right, it's hard for me to see it that way. And it's, I think, because of, like I mentioned, that whole like, oh, you got back from a school, now on to the next thing. It's hard for me to sit here and also take that positive feedback sometimes and go like, but yeah, this is a good thing.
Yeah. Good.
It's good to have that brotherhood because they're helping me appreciate it even more, how much they appreciate it. So I was like, okay, all right, good. I didn't just throw some garbage out there, put together some stories and, just throw it out there. And it wasn't something that resonated. It's actually
Yeah.
something that's kind of good to go here. So
Well, that's good. I mean, it's good to have that feedback. And also, it's like you said, not everyone can write a story. Not everyone can do their memoir, but a lot of people can relate when you're, especially with the group and the bond that you had. So many people being able to relate very specifically to what you were writing. That's a gift to put out there, I think.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's so many different genres, I'll say, of memoir, and the military aspect, I think, is a really beautiful story to weave.
Hmm.
And so I'm glad that you're getting that positive feedback from your friends.
Yeah, and it went beyond friends too. I was surprised some of the feedback I'd gotten. Well, it was from friends, but
Yeah,
they said my story reminded them one said that it reminded them of when their dad returned from Desert Storm. And I thought, okay, here's another aspect of it, keeping these stories alive, because we don't hear a lot from Desert Storm unless it's something about General Norman Schwarzkopf or
yeah,
or whatever, something big. There's not a whole lot of stories out there. So it kind of made me think, Desert Storm is kind of becoming the Korea of our generation. And so I thought, this is a good way to keep these stories alive too, because we're out of there now, for better or
yeah,
worse in between, but that doesn't mean that people aren't still dealing with the aftermath of being there for deployment up to 66 months of deployments, so it just encouraged me in that way too, to say, okay, hey, I think we're doing a good thing here, and more people need to, tell their stories
yeah,
rather than just hearing about Navy SEALs or, special forces and all that, because, and they're, I'm not taking away from them. They're great stories, but
yeah,
there's a lot of guys who spent a lot of time over there and are dealing with things. But yeah, also to
yeah,
encourage those Desert Storm folks to, like, hey, let's not forget about you too, because
yeah,
it may have been over real quick, a decisive war, decisive victory, but there's still some stuff that happened there, and just
absolutely.
just don't let it fade into the memory of history. So
Yeah. Well, I feel like people want those stories that they can relate to. They don't just want the stories that are grandiose or the ones that you hear more often than others. I mean, usually the stories that are, I don't know, have some kind of salacious value to them, so to speak, or the ones that just get glorified for whatever reason.
yeah.
Sometimes those of us who aren't really relating to those stories, just seeing them more as sensational, can look at another story and say, "Oh, okay, well, that feels a little bit more like me and a little bit more
Hmm.
like my circumstances," even though, we're different people, but okay, so I don't have to have had this massive story that became national news to have a positive impact or an impact on other people. I think it's really great to have your kind of story out there.
And it's because we do hear a lot of the sports guy who came in, went on to special operations and did all those things, and again, those are great stories. But
Yeah.
the majority of the military is people like me
Mm,
who were just doing it because they had nothing else to do, or maybe they weren't physically motivated either,
mm,
and
yeah.
joined and still did a great service in their time in, whether it was, just, I don't know, a fueler or a crew chief or someone else that came in and did these things while they were there. So
Right.
yeah, it is. And I think we undervalue our stories too, because it isn't something so up there, but and that's why when people are like, hey, you're a hero, I'm like, no, I'm not. But at the same time, I think a lot of the people in the military are somebody's hero because they did something that they wouldn't do, because the
Yeah.
people that served did something that they would never do or couldn't do and maybe wanted to. So yeah, I think it's good to share these stories to be like, average people did great things too.
Right. And I mean, who's to define average anyway?
Right. Yeah. As a broad stroke
Yes.
term there. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Um, so at the beginning of the when we got on the podcast, you talked about struggling with alcohol.
hmm
Is that something did your struggle begin in the military, or was it something that started before? Or can you walk us through that just a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, it was definitely before. Maybe not so much as a struggle before, but it was just partying and having fun,
Yeah.
just kind of maybe what was expected of your average, again, broad stroke of teenage kid just trying to figure out his way
Yeah.
after high school.
Yeah.
So then, joining the military, I think I won't blame it, but it just kind of exacerbated it because it was acceptable that, hey, you're living in the barracks. I was over 21 by the time I got there. So,
Yeah.
I was able to buy alcohol and do that. Plus, then we hear the stories from, the sergeants that were in other units prior and the, parties on the roof of the barracks, keg parties every weekend or whatever.
Yeah.
It just, to me, it was kind of like accepted and normal. And,
Yeah.
it was going out to the clubs, it was going out here or there. And, I was never really into the club scene. I would go if people were going, but, that wasn't my thing. But really,
Right.
it was just like, hey, this is acceptable. And then it became kind of this, as I was coming up and given leadership roles and having to be in charge, there's a certain kind of like an expected way that you're going to conduct yourself in the infantry.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me some time to realize that I drank heavily because I didn't like who I was becoming. I
Gotcha.
didn't know it at the time, but it just kind of compounded after that. And then, deployments come up for sobriety, it's no big deal. And then back from that, you're making up for lost time and kind of
Yeah.
really go off the rails and all that. And then, kind of have that realization that maybe we should pull the reins back a little bit and then do and don't.
Yeah.
Without giving too much away that's in the book, there was
Yeah.
definitely a yo-yo effect of the alcohol, but the biggest one was that for initially I didn't like who I was becoming, and
Mm-hmm.
then it kind of just became a way of life to cope.
Mm-hmm.
Cope with deployments, cope with whatever life was throwing at me,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was cheap medicine is
Yeah.
what it ended up
Yeah.
becoming. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was ultimately what I was struggling with and what a lot of service members, struggle with. Yeah.
Well, and it's socially acceptable. It's tested for alcohol. It's available. It's its own kind of drug. It's can be what feels like a good crutch or a good numbing mechanism or coping mechanism, like you said.
Yeah.
And do you think it's common for folks in the military to come away with issues with drinking?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Another book I read, it was talking about struggling with PTSD or TBI,
Uh-huh.
traumatic brain injury or something like that. And
Yeah.
the guy wasn't a heavy drinker at all. And then he just had a weekend with his brother or something like that he hadn't seen in a while. And they were drinking all weekend. And he described, this just feeling loose, open, ready to talk,
Mm.
just it was like a warm blanket, or today's terminology, like a safe space, and that's, I think that's what it becomes for a lot of people is it's just a safe space. And other than that, it's outside of drinking or drunkenness is like, like the mask is on, the mask is off type of thing.
Sure.
I can talk about whatever because I'm been drinking and it doesn't matter. But hey, I'm putting the mask back on and this is who you get.
Yeah.
But it's
Wow.
definitely something that a lot of veterans walk away with for sure.
Well, I was recently speaking to another veteran, and he was discussing his problems with alcohol and being in AA. And I don't know if you have done any type of treatment program, just as far as a formal program like that,
I
or
I hadn't done AA. I've done a lot of counseling since 2018 and on, and just identifying the sobriety is just the way I have to go. And for me, there's no in between. One
yeah,
drink will
yeah,
lead to one more, will lead to I'm right back to
yeah,
down in a bottle,
yeah.
a day. There was a moment with my wife that it was like, you're going to pick alcohol or your family
Yeah.
now. And I was like, okay. And
Yeah.
then that was it. I know for a lot of people, it's hard to just do that, but just more with my faith than anything, it's just
Mhm.
like, okay, sobriety is where I got to go. So
Yeah.
cold turkey was just the way to go for me. Just dumping it, throwing it, and just walking away from it rather than going like, okay, well, I'm just, yeah, I think there are some people out there that could handle the whole weaning off process and all that stuff. But yeah, for me, it was just like, no, this has to be done. And I've had good long stints. I don't think I'm at the longest one yet because I'm currently, let's see, this September now. So 2 years and 9 months sober
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
I think my last longest one was like 2 years and 10 months. So I'm almost there,
Yeah.
but I'll get there. And I have no desire to look back whatsoever,
Yeah. That's great.
especially this time. So yeah.
Well, I was in Al-Anon for a while for families that were dealing with addiction. And I remember one of the phrases that was used often was falling off the wagon is part of staying on the wagon.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of recovery. So it's just like mistakes are going to happen. There are
Yeah.
going to be fallbacks, but it doesn't mean that you're not making progress. And it doesn't mean that everything has been scrapped. That's, yeah.
I think like a moment of weakness doesn't define who you are.
Because who doesn't have a few moments of weakness here and there, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or
Especially,
whatever it may be.
things are going good. If you're going good, feeling well, and then I don't know, snowball effect, you compound some bad things and that drink starts looking good. Yeah.
So there's one area that I wanted to ask you about. And did you keep a lot in, like silence, just keep the silence in until you just exploded and had to tell the story? Or were you holding it? Were you sharing with Jenny, with your wife? Were you the struggles that you were going through? Tell me a little bit about holding the silence.
Think because she'll say that I didn't talk much about deployments, and maybe I remember it wrong then because I think I talked about anything that was relevant because for me it is just what we did day to day. It's not that there was necessarily a secretive nature about the things. Sure,
Mhm.
there's stuff that we can't necessarily talk about while we're in the moment, and then maybe we think about not talking about it later. So I don't think it's silence by intentionality.
Mhm.
I think it's accidentally. If I was deployed, I would give her the details that I could or that I knew she needed to know.
Yeah.
But, if we were like, oh, we got rocketed a bunch today, but I'm okay or whatever, I didn't, hesitate to tell her those things. But
Yeah.
I also didn't want her back home dealing with what she had to go through and worrying about me nonstop too. But then I kind of like, yeah, you asked me about Ranger and Halo,
Mm.
more of those stories are starting to come out now that my daughters being almost 16 and just turned 13 are old enough
Okay.
to hear those stories. So I'm opening up a bit more, not because I had, a secret box that was stashed away of things I didn't ever want to tell them, but
Sure.
one, because they are interested in it.
Mm.
Two, because I want to tell them about it. And three, I kind of tell them the lighter side of things. So,
Yeah.
I was talking about going to SEER school, which is survival school, and they smack you around a bit and all that too. So,
Yeah.
I was telling him, I said, I kind of got lucky though, because I got this old guy who wouldn't, when I saw some of the other guys really getting wailed on, I was like, avoid that guy, so stories about, like piling up leaves or whatever to make a place to lay down on. So it was a little bit warmer than open ground and, eating bugs or whatever type of stuff. It's just to make them laugh, gross them out, and share that with
Yeah.
them. But telling them some about deployments and stuff too. The biggest reason I started the book was to have something to hand my daughters. They had something to maybe tell their kids about later as well, because I don't know much about my grandfathers. I know my dad's side. He lived in Minnesota, was a Marine in the Korean War for some time, or during
Mm.
the Korean War time, and was in Korea for some time. He worked for the railroad and retired from that out in Spokane, Washington area, and then started a farm. That's all I know. I don't. Seven sisters and one brother, and there's a bunch of halves in the mix of that. So anytime I get told that story, I need like a full-on family tree diagram to follow it. It's insane.
Yeah.
And then on my mom's side, it was my grandfather was in the Navy, and then afterward he raced cars, and I saw him a total of like 5 times in my life. The guy I knew as my grandpa died when I was 8, but I guess that would have been like a step grandpa. So I was really starting that way. My daughters would have something, not go, well, I know Dad was in the Army, and then it turned into what it is, and I was like, well, maybe you can read it after you turn 18 because it's pretty serious. But I wanted to capture all that stuff that was either had been told already or in that silent space as well, so that way they could know all of it, including the struggles and all that, and just maybe it would help encourage them in times that they might have been feeling low or something like that too.
I think that having that there, even if just for posterity's sake, so it's there, is great for your kids to have. And when they do get to read it, it'll be interesting to see their reaction, not necessarily to the stories, but just in my own personal experience, having written a memoir recently, and my children have read it. And one of my kids said to me, I didn't really ever think about you as a person. I really just thought about you as mom, which makes sense, right? I mean, it's a kid. This is what mom does, mom this and that. And so to see a different side of your parent, I think that's a real gift for your kids to have eventually. I mean, there's things that I really didn't necessarily want my kids to know about or read about, but at the same time, it's like, well, I want them to know that, yeah, I struggled too. I had, my demons or whatever it was.
Yeah, I think I didn't even think about it until you mentioned it, but yeah, there are kids see the day to day, but the memoirs, the stories give them the inner workings of it, so they can kind of see how the gears were turning instead of just what happens real time while the gears are turning, so they can see the thought process behind it. But yeah, I think that's that gives me a little more optimism that they might read some of it and be like, okay, he was working through this rather than you did that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. When you're telling it verbally to your child, it is a story, right? And so they imagine dad as they know dad in this, they're trying to fit you into this visual that they've come up with, of jumping out of an airplane or whatever. But then to go and actually read it from your perspective when you're not necessarily, you're telling your story, you're not telling them a story about your experience. There's enough difference there that I think it's actually one friend of mine said that her psychiatrist said every parent should write a memoir so their kids can understand them later.
Yeah, even if it's a short story memoir and this would happened, when that would help them understand later rather than mom's being a jerk or dad's being a jerk,
Right,
there's a reason that you think I'm being a jerk and here's why.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense. I like it.
Yeah. So do they have a favorite story that you tell them, one that they say, tell us again?
I don't think so. I think, that I've given them enough like fresh stuff to work with. They're just kind of like, just not amazed, but just kind of, just whatever the lighter version of in awe is about, some of the stuff we went through or I did. But no, there's nothing in particular like, oh, hey, tell us about that one time again. No, there's nothing like that.
So what was your favorite bug?
Probably ants. They're just, just squish it real quick and get it over with. No real flavor. You could just kind of,
Doesn't taste like chicken.
Yeah, I preferred not the bugs. And then there was some stick. I can't remember what it was, but they showed us how to identify this tree. Like, you can take this stick, break just a small, little twig of it off, kind of blanch out the end of it, and you can use it to brush your teeth. And I carried a bunch of those around just because.
Okay. Yeah.
In long range surveillance, we typically did 3 to 5 day missions, and you don't take any comfort items because how we'd operate is beyond friendly lines. to put it easily. And so, any scent, deodorant, anything like that would kind of give your position away. So the real training was 3 days prior while you're doing mission planning. You didn't shower, you didn't, use toothpaste if you brush your teeth type of stuff so that it wouldn't give it. And this was more for the Vietnam era guys when they had to deal with that kind of serious stuff.
Okay.
And going in there. So, you'd get that fur feeling on your teeth. It's really gross.
Yeah.
So by the time I got to SEER school and they taught us that, I was like, one, I wish I would have known about this years ago.
Yeah.
And two, I'd snap a couple of those branches and keep them in my, or the little twigs and keep them in my pocket. And it's like, yeah, as we're walking around out there in the middle of the woods, it's just like, brushing my teeth with it and all that stuff. And I'm just glad my teeth aren't anywhere near as bad as I think they should be for how much damage they should have gotten from all my time in.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. You'll have to let me know later, and I'll put it in the show notes what type of tree and how to identify it, the twig.
Yeah, I'll look it up because it had a not lemony but citrusy kind of flavor to it as well. So yeah, it also left you feeling a little refreshed. I wasn't gonna jam it around on my tongue or anything like that, but
Right.
yeah, it was just like, oh, this is better than feeling that fur growth on your teeth.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the title of your book, Walking Away from the Ledge. And it's a good visual. It's a good understanding of there's two sides to that.
Yeah.
But what brought you to that title?
So the title originally came from an actual suicide ideation that was moments away from being an attempt. That was 2021. I was at the end of my rope and I was going to throw myself over the ledge. But I didn't, obviously. We're still, but the title has morphed into more for me personally. And I think it can for anybody else who reads it and gets that from me as well, because it's really turned into the ledge being any of those destructive behaviors that would lead us up to that ledge in the first place.
Yeah.
So whether it's addiction or an attitude or a mentality or ego, anything that would lead you up to that, that's what it's actually turned into for me. And I forget exactly what kind of changed that aspect for me, but that's, yeah, initially the title was based off of that. And and I actually wrote it, when it gets to that part of the book, I actually wrote it in there like that. But yeah, it's definitely turned into a, cut the crap before you get to that ledge anyway, type of thing, for myself personally. And I think that is kind of a good takeaway more to the end of the book when I do kind of wrap it up in that, in different words, but so much in that sense, just like that. Yeah.
So what brought you to the ledge, if you want to share, just even why the ledge and not someone?
So it was just a conglomeration of life not going right, or maybe what I expected. It was my marriage wasn't doing great, drinking heavily on top of that, not doing much, if anything, to make the changes myself in that. We had a whatever, they may read the book, but we had a horrible chain of command from the top down. And I just was not jiving with anybody there on that, which was really challenging because, I went from my deployment in Kandahar in 2019, 2020, which included, finishing up that deployment through COVID and all the extra hardships that brought.
Yeah.
But we had this great chain of command from top down while we were deployed. Well, middle top down, I'll say that. And then we get back to a new chain of command and all that kind of stuff. And it was just not as cohesive, not as respectful of an experience. It's a good way to put it, as while we were deployed. And so there was headbutting at every turn, and all of it combined to just like this is it. This is my life's work here. And I'm about to throw it over this edge for the whole world to see.
Yeah.
And I just don't care. What brought me back from that initially was a fear of failure. I had this fear that I was going to do this, not die, live through it, and maybe be a vegetable, a paraplegic, a whatever. And now I was going to have to sit there in some sort of altered mental state or physical state. And now my family was going to have to take care of me. And I just was like, I can do this to myself, but I can't do it to them. And that's what actually was the thing that brought me back through it, back from it. So, and that
Interesting.
I don't laugh at it like, haha, it was funny, but just
Sure.
the fear of failure. I was just like, when I was thinking about it later and writing it, I was like, a fear of failure is what kept me from doing it. That's crazy
Yeah.
because all the time throughout the military, I had a fear of failure on everything, but I
Sure.
just kept going. And
Mm.
on this one, I had a fear of failure, and I backed up. So,
Mm.
so yeah,
Yeah.
that kept me from finishing it. It's just so crazy.
Well, it's really like you got a dose of reality in the minute of some insanity.
Yeah, yeah, actually, yeah, that's a good way
You
to put
know,
it.
you just because it's true. That's what could have happened.
Hmm.
And
Exactly.
that's the reality of, the choice that it could turn into something just devastating to not just you, but to your family
Yeah,
and not a death, but like you said, a paraplegic or just a coma.
yeah.
I think that's really interesting that that came to you the way it did. And,
Hmm.
and you listened and you gave it some serious consideration and walked away. I'm glad
Yeah.
you did.
Me too. I think they're
Yeah.
all glad too.
I
I would
think
have
I'm
hate
sure they are.
I would have hate to have not been able to explain that one too,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It'd be a whole other story.
right.
So, fear of failure, would you compare that to perfection as well?
Yeah, definitely perfectionist, because I was thinking about that. I think, because I had looked at, like work, right? And they talk about
Mhm.
preparing for a resume and, don't use terms like perfectionism as a strength or something. Was reading that somewhere and I was like, I think perfectionism is a weakness myself because if I was so driven to perfectionism, like going back on kind of that main rotor track and balance, I want to get the vibrations down to zero and I'm not going to accept anything down less than zero. Well, can't get less than zero.
Yeah.
Anything, that's above zero, then it
Mhm.
gets to a point where it's like, okay, well, there's parameters for a reason. And, as long as
Yeah.
it's under 0.15 or below down to zero, you're good. And it's just to maintain the life of the equipment. So you coming to the point where not everything has to be perfect was a challenge for me too,
Mm.
because I always just saw that. And if I didn't reach that level of perfection that I was trying to hold myself to, it was a failure. So now to me, I failed even though I passed. So that was something I struggled with a lot as well, trying to deal with perfectionism versus fear of failure, versus like sometimes that A minus is perfect. It is
Yeah.
good because it accomplishes a mission, especially in the army. And still, even after that, I got to just be like, okay, hey, hey, was that podcast A plus on my end? Well, maybe not, but still, we're going to get it out there, and the
Yeah.
information's going to, and someone needs to hear it. So
Yeah. Yeah,
was it
absolutely.
perfect? Maybe, maybe not. But did
Yeah.
we fail? Absolutely not. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's now it's that whole balancing it out and realizing, what's what instead of worrying about did I fail? Just like, well, we did it. So, we're doing something. So yeah.
Yeah. So does the perfectionism and the strive not to fail include any opportunity to ask for help, or is it all you?
Mm. I think at a time that it would have been to be like, if I have to ask for help, I've failed.
Hmm.
And especially with like a mental state,
Yeah.
because, particularly for military, particularly for men, and I'm not excluding women, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying particularly for, um, it's if you can't handle it yourself, you failed. If
Yeah.
you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps and keep on going, then there's something wrong with you and you failed. So I think that's something else that I had to let go of as well, to just be able to go get the help I need, or even just to say, hey, I need help. And
Yeah.
now that I think back on it, the first time I did make that call for help in 2018 to say, hey, I need to schedule an appointment for behavioral health,
Yeah.
I was holding back tears and I was getting choked up on the phone.
Mm.
At the time, I thought it was because I knew I needed to do this and I was finally doing it. But I think also there's some of that I failed myself. by
Mm.
not being able to help myself.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, just trying to be able to, put it all aside, pride and ego to go like, let's go get this help, you know.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it would definitely be a challenge for most people to go like, that's the stigma that needs to be overridden, is that you failed. Like, okay,
Yeah.
you just need more. Like, we didn't just, do a job, show
Mm.
up day one, and we were professionals at it,
Right.
So it's the same thing with getting that mental help. You don't know or have all the tools to be able to get that
Yeah.
mental help, and you need someone else to help you give you those tools and practice those and apply those principles. So, just
Yeah.
figure you can read it in a book and be good, but you need to, practice it or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Practicing helps. I often envision myself with a tool belt and think, golly, I need another tool. There's a tool I don't have.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I guess that's when you ask for help.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Like, I don't know how to handle this one myself.
Yeah.
Somebody does. Somebody's
Yeah.
walked through it too, so maybe they can help me out.
Yeah.
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 And
Exactly.
I think that that's another thing too. Like, we tend to think we need a professional to
Mm.
help us when really, we just need someone like you, like me, who's walked through that to be able to at
Yeah.
least guide someone on to the next step for that help
Yeah.
or anything. Not to
Yeah.
say like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I've been there, I've done that. Here's what you need to do, but just like, oh hey, I've gone through that. Here's what helped for me. I know someone
Yeah.
you could talk to, to get further
Yes.
help. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and so being vulnerable, having a book out there gives the opportunity for someone to maybe ask for that help.
Yeah.
Didn't know anybody else would be okay hearing what they needed for fear of failure.
Yeah, and I had a couple guys talk to me over the last weekend too, going, hey, I see you're not drinking. I see you're offered drink, and you were just like, no thanks, and kept going like it was no big deal. And I was like, yeah, because it was no big deal. And they're
Yeah.
like, well, I think I need to as well. How'd you do that? And
Mm.
so I was
Yeah.
like, this is a good conversation. And that was kind of an eye opener to me to be like, okay, this is also something in that next step. I don't know how for sure, but to, part of the thing of my book, whether I said it in the beginning or not, was to encourage people to seek that help. I believe I said that,
Mm.
but
Mm. Yeah.
also I could be the conduit to kind of help get them to it. So kind of like we were just saying anyway, so that it's, it's not the step I intended to set out to do, to help people. But if
Yeah.
that's where it leads me to, then hey, I'm not a pro, but I'll walk through that and I'll get all the help I need to help other
Yeah.
people through it too.
Yeah. Yeah. I when people would come to me and say, I might need your advice, as I'm raising my children.
Yeah.
And I would say, well, I can tell you what not to do.
Yeah. 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 I
I
can
may not
definitely
know
tell you
what to
things that
do.
didn't work. Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
claim
Yeah.
to be an expert. um,
From
so it's what are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you watching?
So right now I'm not really reading anything,
Okay.
but I did recently read Legacy Mindset by Corey Schaefer, the founder of Till Valhalla Project,
Oh
and it
yeah.
was a fantastic book. One thing I didn't ever think of that he covered in there in really good detail that I think a lot of military members go through is untested valor. So,
Hmm.
you read through my book, and I've had all of this training, all of this stuff, and we did our actual missions so few times in combat that
Yeah.
as I kind of put it, we went to the Super Bowl, but I was
Mm.
on special teams or sitting on the bench, so I didn't
Yeah.
get much play time for the actual mission we went there for. We did plenty of things, but
Sure.
it wasn't fully what we trained for. So
Mm.
that was a really uh, tough aspect of it. But seeing that a lot of us have that untested valor that we didn't get to see, hey, could have I accomplished it under the most
Yeah.
austere conditions rather than just being in a environment away from home, was definitely challenging.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not realizing it till after the fact that was, a big disappointment.
So anything you're watching these days that, or any favorite binge?
Right now, the terminal list,
Oh,
what was
yeah.
it? Dark Wolf, the second season just came out, and
Good.
I liked the first one good enough. Some of it seemed a little hokey, but it was great, a great story. And then the second season's really good so far.
Okay. Great. Great. And do you listen to music? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you have a
Podcasts and
favorite?
music. Really liking my wife's podcast, Hidden
Yeah.
Chapters,
Yeah. Hidden
which you
Chapters.
were
Shout
on.
out.
Yeah. And really enjoying that. And what other podcasts have I been listening to recently? That one was kind of The Veritable Veteran. Actually trying
Oh,
to work with him. He was a prior Marine, so I sent him a copy of my book. We're trying to work something out because kind of what I'm telling people too is like, hey, I don't want to be on your podcast just to promote my book.
yeah.
That'll happen naturally. I would like
Yeah.
to, in whatever way, shape, or form, whether it's just sharing or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, just somehow partner, with
Yeah.
someone. So
Yeah.
he's got these really great takes on his social media feeds. Of some of them are comical, like what was it like being in the military and making light of it, or like
Yeah.
uh going into that corporate work environment, working with people, and here comes the new guy who finds out this guy was prior military or whatever, and has a million questions and is just all excited to ask him, and then the prior military guy's okay, it was comical because he was like, so have you ever killed anybody? And then it cuts to like the other guy and is like, totally inappropriate question, dude. And he was like, okay, we're done here. So a lot of it's comical, but on his podcast, he's hitting deep with
Yeah.
all the stuff that we're kind of talking about too. So
Yeah.
so
Good.
hopefully he gets through my book.
Yeah.
And we can get on there too, and I think that'd be a really great conversation. And any podcast I've been on recently, they've all been great. This has been great too. Just really
Good.
trying to raise that awareness of just
Yeah.
hey, we're all okay, not okay. Like it's break the stigma,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. It's okay to not be okay
Yeah.
because
And
we're not.
as far as music goes, anything 90s alternative is that's my teenage years,
Okay.
that's always got me. My older daughter loves it. My younger daughter, not so much, but she'll listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They call it dad rock. I didn't know that was a thing, so that was really cool.
I don't think I knew that either.
Yeah, so anything Stone Temple Pilots, Nirvana, Soundgarden, all that stuff from the 90s, it's been dubbed dad rock. So I was like,
okay,
yeah, I'll take it. That's good. Yeah, all day.
It's probably better than a dad joke.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you'll be at the Military Influencer Conference. Is that right? Coming up at the end of September?
Yes, both me and my wife will be there. So we're both networking, making contacts, maybe selling some books. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wish you the best there. I'm going to be there for a night and part of a day. So maybe I'll get to see you and your wife and meet you in person.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for being on In the Margins with me. Thanks for sharing. I really appreciate it, Chris.
Yeah, no, this is great. Absolutely. Love being here.
Good.
Thanks. Bye.
What a great conversation. I was so glad to have Chris on and get to talk about his military career but most importantly, what he has endured, what he has struggled with and is coming out on the other side. I hope that you as a listener felt some inspiration, and his memoir is Walking Away from the Ledge. It was great having Chris on today. Thank you for being here and for listening, and we'll see you in the margins. You've been listening to In the Margins. If this episode spoke to you, the best way you can support the podcast is by following, liking, and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And if you'd like to connect, I'd love to hear from you at podcastinginthemargins@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and remember, some of the best stories are found in the margins.